Imagine living a life where pain, death, and poverty no longer frighten you. A life where your only true concern is to live with virtue and to grow into the fullest version of yourself. This is the heart of Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most admired Stoic philosophers, left us his private reflections in Meditations. The idea of being a great person can feel abstract, but if anyone in history deserves that title, Marcus is among the strongest candidates. What he offers isn't self-help in the modern sense. It's a way of thinking that still speaks to many of the struggles we face today. To understand his philosophy, it helps to see the world he lived in. Marcus Aurelius ruled as Roman emperor from 161 to 180 AD. He was the last of the so-called five good emperors and presided over what came to be known as the Pax Romana, a long stretch of relative peace within the empire. Yet, even in that era of stability, his reign was far from easy. He faced brutal wars on the empire's borders and a devastating pandemic, the Antonine Plague, which cost countless lives. As emperor, Marcus was the most powerful man in the known world. Roman emperors could indulge in any pleasure without consequence. Wealth, luxury, and excess were not just available to them but expected. Nothing stood in their way. Not money, not law, not custom. And yet Marcus made a different choice. Despite living with limitless freedom to indulge every desire, he chose discipline. He chose integrity. He chose to live consistently by virtue. That doesn't mean being good automatically made him great. But imagine resisting temptation, not for a day, not for a week, but for nearly 20 years, knowing no one could punish you if you slipped. He resisted not for applause, not for recognition, but because to him, living virtuously was its own reward. That is extraordinary. Now ask yourself, if you were in his place, could you live the same way? With no consequences for indulgence, no limits on what you could take or consume, would you choose the harder path of virtue? Few of us, honestly, could. This is what makes his Meditations so powerful. What we read today was never meant for an audience. It was his private journal, his raw reflections. Divided into 12 books, about 150 pages, it is one of the most intimate works ever written by a ruler. Publishers later gave it the title Meditations, but for Marcus, it was simply a place to write down how he wrestled with his own weaknesses and reminded himself of the principles he wanted to live by. To appreciate it fully, you should read it yourself. Copies are everywhere, in libraries, in bookstores, online. But here, let's focus on a few core ideas. One of Marcus's deepest convictions was to live according to nature. By nature, he didn't just mean plants and animals, but the order of the universe itself. A tree grows tall not for applause, but because that is what it was made to do. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly. A chick becomes an eagle, not out of ambition, but out of their nature. And Marcus believed the same applies to us. Marcus believed that our highest duty is not to collect wealth or praise, but to live up to the potential we were born with. Nature made you human, and for him, that meant striving to be the kindest, most virtuous human possible. To fall short of that, to waste your potential, was for Marcus the deepest kind of failure. One of the central truths of Stoicism is that you cannot control what happens outside of you, but you can always control how you meet it. Life will bring storms, setbacks, and trials. The Stoic response is not to avoid them, but to rise through them, to live as fully and as nobly as you can, no matter the weather. As emperor, Marcus faced trials most of us can only imagine. War, plague, betrayal, and loss. Yet he understood something simple. Evil and adversity are part of the natural order. To wish them away is like wishing for roses without thorns. Difficult people will always exist, adversity will always arrive. But here is where Marcus's perspective is striking. He believed that people rarely act out of deliberate malice. Most wrongdoing, he thought, comes from ignorance, people not understanding what is right. You may try to guide them, but not everyone can be reached. And in those moments, his advice was to look inward, to remind yourself that you too have flaws, that you too can be mistaken, and that you may not see the whole story. The thief who steals to feed his family may not be evil. You may simply not understand his burden. This humility led Marcus to a simple truth. We are made for each other. Just as trees bear fruit for animals, and animals in turn nourish the earth, we exist to contribute to one another's lives. To fail in this duty of kindness is, in his view, the only real failure. Adversity, too, was to be met with the same spirit. He did not advise praying for an easy life. That is beyond our control. Instead, he taught us to be ready, to strengthen ourselves so that when hardship arrives, we do not collapse under it. Don't waste energy on self-pity or complaint. See the trial as an opportunity to rise, to prove to yourself what you are made of. And if fate should hand you something truly unbearable, Marcus's counsel was simple. Endure it without disgrace. Death comes to all, but not all face it with dignity. Even with immense power and wealth at his command, Marcus remained wary of possessions. He did not see material things as evil in themselves, but he refused to let them rule him. For him, the measure of a life was not what you owned, but how you lived, with courage, with virtue, and with compassion. Marcus could have had anything: palaces, treasures, endless wine, and feasts. Nothing was beyond his reach. Yet he chose not to dream of such things, because he saw them for what they were: distractions. They are pleasant for a moment, but they do not fulfill your deeper potential. He advised reflecting on what you have, valuing it, but never clinging so tightly that its loss would leave you broken. Possessions, status, praise, none of these make you more virtuous or more kind. Your true potential lies higher than that. Death, too, was something he contemplated often, not with dread, but with acceptance. For him, death was not an interruption of life, but part of its design. Just as nature assigns us the duty to grow, to act with goodness, to reach our potential, it also assigns us the duty to die. To fear this is to fight what cannot be fought. His view was simple. While you are here, live fully, live with kindness, live with courage, and when the time comes, leave as naturally as you arrived. Marcus, alongside other Stoic thinkers, became one of the forebearers of a philosophy that has endured for centuries. Stoicism explored many areas: logic, ethics, human behavior. But at its heart lies one key distinction: the difference between pleasure and true happiness. Wealth, fame, success, these may bring temporary pleasure, but they quickly fade. Happiness, on the other hand, is something deeper. It is a state of being that arises not from the world outside, but from the way you live within yourself. For the Stoics, happiness is born from virtue, from striving to be wiser, braver, more just, and more disciplined each day. In their view, the only real failure in life is to neglect this duty, to fall short of becoming who you are capable of being. To be great is not vanity, it is simply your role in nature. In the end, Stoicism teaches that wisdom and peace come from aligning your life with nature itself. That means focusing only on what is truly within your control, your thoughts and your actions, and living with reason and virtue as your guides. The 4 cornerstones they named were wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. A Stoic does not fear pain, death, or poverty. Their only fear is to abandon their moral duty. Challenges did not intimidate Marcus Aurelius. His true concern was not what others might do to him, but whether he himself might fall short of living fully as a human being. He once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." A striking example of this principle came in 175 AD during the betrayal of his general Avidius Cassius. Cassius had been one of Marcus's closest allies, a trusted commander, and yet he declared himself emperor and led a rebellion. Few betrayals could cut deeper. The natural reaction would have been anger, vengeance, the desire to crush a traitor and make an example of him. But Marcus chose differently. Remaining true to his Stoic discipline, he stayed composed. His focus was not on revenge, but on the stability of the empire. He sent his forces forward, yes, but not to punish with cruelty, only to restore order. Before Marcus reached him, Cassius was assassinated by his own men, and Marcus's response was revealing. He did not rejoice. He did not celebrate the fall of a rival. Instead, he mourned the loss of a former friend and extended clemency to those who had supported Cassius. To Marcus, vengeance would have only deepened the wound. Mercy was the higher path. This moment reveals his strength of character. The best revenge, as he taught, is not to mirror the wrongdoer, but to rise above him, to remain whole, virtuous, and untouched by bitterness. That is true power. Marcus understood this truth in more than just political matters. He wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." For him, guarding the mind was essential. Wars, plague, political unrest. His reign was marked by relentless hardship. It would have been easy to descend into despair or cynicism. Yet he trained himself to keep his thoughts steady, clear, and virtuous, knowing that what he allowed into his mind would eventually shape his soul and direct his actions. Even in the harshest conditions, leading his troops on the frozen frontiers during the Marcomannic Wars, far from the comfort of Rome, he carried this discipline. Surrounded by suffering and uncertainty, he reminded himself again and again, what matters is not what happens, but how you choose to meet it. The threat of battle, the burden of leadership, and the distance from his family could easily have crushed Marcus Aurelius under the weight of negative thoughts. Yet instead of surrendering to despair, he chose to cultivate resilience and virtue. Each day he turned inward, he reflected, he wrote, he examined his own mind. These private reflections, later known as meditations, became his way of steadying himself. In them, he reminded himself of what mattered most: courage, patience, wisdom. He reflected on the fleeting nature of life, the preciousness of each moment, and the importance of living in harmony with his principles. By training his thoughts in this way, he dyed his soul with virtue. His inner discipline allowed him to meet hardship with calm, fairness, and strength. This composure inspired his soldiers in war and his people at home. It showed that leadership, at its highest, begins within. This example reminds us that our inner work shapes everything else. The thoughts we nurture, the reflections we return to, these form the foundation of our character, and character is what guides us when the world grows turbulent. Marcus once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." He lived this principle during one of the darkest times of his reign, the Antonine Plague. Fear and panic spread quickly. Resources dwindled. Life itself felt uncertain. Politicians and philosophers argued endlessly about what should be done, what a good leader ought to be in such a moment. Marcus chose not to argue, but to act. Despite the personal risk, he remained at his post, fulfilling his duty. He directed funds to public health efforts, sanitation, and medical care. He ensured aid reached those in need and provided support for families devastated by loss. His leadership was not about words, but about service. In doing so, he embodied the very Stoic virtues he cherished: duty, resilience, and compassion. He showed that wisdom is not found in endless debate, but in action guided by principle. Marcus Aurelius showed that a good leader is not defined by long philosophical debates, but by their devotion to the well-being of their people. He reminded us that true goodness is revealed not in words, but in the way we live and act, especially when life is hardest. During the Antonine Plague, his choices earned him the respect and admiration of those he ruled. In a time of fear and despair, he became a steady presence, a symbol of integrity and compassion. His actions revealed his character clearly, that leadership is not about authority, but about embodying virtue through service. This moment from his life highlights a timeless truth. Living your values matters more than speaking about them. By focusing on what needed to be done and meeting it with courage and fairness, Marcus embodied the Stoic ideal of simply being a good person. It is a reminder for us as well. The most powerful statement we can make is not what we say we believe, but how we choose to live each day. One of Marcus's reflections captures this spirit beautifully. When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love. These words were more than a thought for him. They were a practice. Imagine him, waking in a military tent on a cold, foggy morning. The air is sharp, soldiers stir outside, and the weight of empire presses upon him. Yet before rushing into duty, he allows himself a moment of quiet. He breathes deeply. He reflects on the gift of being alive for another day. He feels gratitude for the chance to reason, to make choices, to lead with fairness. He takes comfort in the simple truth that he can still think, still act, still love. Then, wrapping his cloak tighter, he rises to meet whatever the day will bring. Marcus wraps his cloak tighter around himself, feeling its warmth as he listens to distant birdsong. These small, simple details of life bring him peace. His thoughts drift to his family back in Rome. Though he misses them deeply, he feels gratitude for their love and support. The quiet gratitude fills his heart and strengthens him for the challenges of the day. When he steps out of his tent, he greets his soldiers with a smile. His calm presence lifts their spirits, and he encourages them to pause, even briefly, to notice the good in their own lives. Gratitude, he believed, was not weakness, but strength, a way to steady the mind amid hardship. Throughout the day, whether discussing battle plans with his generals or sharing bread with his men, Marcus always found moments to be thankful. This practice anchored him, helping him stay calm, focused, and fair. His example spread naturally. His attitude was contagious, and those around him began to mirror it. One evening, as soldiers gathered around the campfire after a long and bitter day, Marcus shared a simple reflection. Each morning, remember how fortunate you are to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love. His words sank in. The men began their own practice of morning gratitude, finding small things each day to appreciate. This quiet habit gave them strength and helped them remain united even as hardship pressed in. Through gratitude, Marcus sustained not only his own spirit, but the spirit of those around him. His practice showed that even in the darkest times, there is always something worth giving thanks for. That lesson still speaks to us today. Marcus Aurelius's life and writings continue to remind us that greatness is not found in wealth, titles, or comfort. True greatness comes from within, from choosing to live in alignment with our highest values, no matter what life brings. If we strive to live with virtue, to focus on what lies within our control, and to meet adversity with resilience, we too can create lives of meaning and strength. That is the lasting gift of Stoicism.